Hey guys, what's going on? It's Filmington. This video is going to be centered around tips for selling on eBay. One of the last ones I did was buying tips. This one's going to be even better. Before I get into it, I was on a podcast with Mike Giuseppe and Jesse Gibson. This was Bill Simmons' The Ringer Sports Cards Nonsense podcast, and that was filmed this past Monday. Recorded Monday and uploaded, I believe, Monday night. So I'll put a link in the description to that. You can find that on Stitcher, Spotify, and wherever podcasts are found. So first tip for selling on eBay is, sometimes if you've got a bin listing, maybe it's a little bit overpriced. People will reach out to you if they're interested in that item. Say if it's in demand, it's hot, and they'll say, hey, what's like the lowest you could do on this? And if you actually want to sell the item and if you want to be reasonable and you understand that your price is a little too high, then what you can actually do in the message itself within eBay is hit a button that's like send offer or reply with offer. So what I would say is don't do that. Don't fall for that. That will give the buyer the best leverage because he's got no other competition. What you can do instead is go back to the seller menu under active listings, and certain items will be eligible to send best offers out to a wide group of interested parties. And these aren't going to be the same individuals as the ones that are watching it. There's going to be a lot of overlap. It's going to be some people that have clicked on the listing, before, and maybe people that have sent you offers before that aren't watching it, but it'll give you access to potentially like upwards of, I don't know, depending on the listing, it could be like 50 people, 100 people. Usually it's going to be somewhere around probably like 2 to 20. You can send out that offer to all of them. That way the buyer kind of feels the heat and they're like, oh, geez, this is like a pretty reasonable offer. I might as well accept this thing before anybody else gets to it. And it's not unfair to him because you're still giving him that chance. And if he hadn't reached out to you, then he wouldn't get that chance to get that offer. Tip number 2 is and this is for buying too. If somebody reaches out to you and is interested in something you have, sometimes what I do is I'll look at the username and see if I can find that person on Instagram. Now, there are other more risky methods that people use, like they'll actually write in like the DM through eBay, like this is my Instagram handle. Sometimes they'll take a picture of like their phone number and send it over. eBay does screen for like keywords. I don't know if they screen attachments. And it seems like they haven't done a great job keeping up with that. And maybe with like the whole boom in the hobby, it's just hard to police everybody's messages. I have been called out on it once years back. I forget if I was in the shoes of the buyer or the seller at that point. Since then, I've been pretty conservative. And what I'll do is I'll kind of just like look at the handle and I'll see if I can find that person on, it's usually Instagram. It helps if you have a consistent brand handle from kind of one platform to the next. Not everybody has that. Next tip, and this is something that I recently adopted over the last few months. I think it's in your best interest to automate feedback as a seller. So what you can do is you can go, I think you have to do this from the PC. If you can do it from the app, I haven't been able to find how, but maybe you can as well. But from the PC, there's 2 ways to do it. Go to the Seller Hub, and then scroll down to the Seller Tools menu, and then you can click on the Automate Feedback button. Or you can go to like Manage Automated Feedback, which is a button underneath the feedback section. This is all in the main like Seller Hub directory. And what you want to do, in my opinion, is you want to automatically leave feedback after the buyer has paid for the item. So you might be thinking like, well, what if they don't leave me feedback though? What if they end up scamming me, or if they end up opening up a case or returning the item? How do I know that they're going to be a good buyer and that they're going to do the right thing? Well, what I would say is that your number one priority as a seller is to get that feedback score as high as possible, as quick as possible. You want the highest percentage of buyers to leave you positive feedback. And, if somebody gets a cookie that they don't deserve at the end of the day, that's not really a big deal, and that shouldn't distract you from your number one priority of building that feedback score. As a seller, you can't leave negative feedback anyway, so it's not like you're really missing out on much. Now, you could always report the buyer if they end up doing something shady, and eBay's not going to use the feedback you gave them before you ship the item as leverage against you if there ends up being a he said, she said situation where they're trying to return the item or it shows up not as described or they call their credit card company. Another thing to think about is like they have up to like 6 months in some cases with their bank to open up a chargeback against you. And that's outside the feedback window anyways. So what are you going to wait till like the 90th day and then leave feedback for the buyer? Because they could still screw you afterwards. So leave that feedback right away. And, something that I've noticed is that sometimes you don't get feedback, it doesn't get reciprocated if you're the seller and you don't leave it right away. And what I would do in the past is literally like at the end of each month, I would like leave feedback. Sometimes it would be for like 10, 20, 30, 40 different transactions all at once. And these are folks that probably thought that I just forgot that they weren't going to get feedback. And I think that ultimately hurt my score because I just waited too long to give the feedback and I tried to do it all at once. And you can do bulk updates on the feedback to make it a little bit easier. But it's all about the speed. It's all about doing it right after the transaction happens. So you're making that buyer happy. Number 4, list items in auction at low starting bids. So minimum bids of 10% or less of what you think that item will go for in auction. So if it's $100, no more than $9.99. If it's $500, no more than $49.99. To be honest, I usually don't list anything above $9.99 unless it's like a $5,000 item, maybe $3,000 or $4,000 item. I might go up to like 1 to 2%. So like I might go up to like $19.99, $50 maybe for like a $5,000 item. If it's something that's under $100, so something that's a bit lower end, I'll start that at 99 cents. Certainly will. So 99 cents in most cases. Sometimes I'll jump it up to $9.99 personally, but always make sure to keep that under 10% of what you think it'll actually go for, because as a seller, you want as many eyes as possible. You want to trick people into thinking they can get a great deal on something, and that you want them to watch it. You want them to click on it. You want them to think they can get it. You want them to load up their snipes for that item, and you want as much activity as possible. And again, the algorithm loves the hits. They love the watches, and that's what you're going for. Number 5. So this is a big one. This is probably the biggest one. You should consider how a store, an eBay store, can support you. And we're going to get through some numbers here, and this will be helpful. A basic eBay store is going to cost you $22 a month. That's if you renew annually. So you're kind of locked in for a year at that price. If you want to pay month to month, it's $28 per month. A starter store, which I don't think gives you nearly as many benefits, but I'll just leave it here because that's like the cheapest store. That's $5 a month. If you pay, all up front, you pay that $60 for the year, or it's $8 per month if you want to pay month per month and renew, each month. Now, I have a basic store, the one that's $28 a month if you pay month by month. And I'll tell you a story. I sold a $25,000 card in February of 2021, and I'm going to bring up this eBay fee calculator tool. It's something that I use quite a bit, and it actually updates often whenever there's like changes in eBay's fee structure. So it was last updated in October. So a $25,000 card, what do you think I paid for in fees? I sold it on eBay. I paid $848 in selling fees on a $25,000 card. That's effectively a 3.28% rate, and it would have been under 3% if I was a top-rated seller at the time, which I don't think I was. So a lot of people think like, I see people on Facebook all the time like, you're going to accept that offer on eBay? We're going to have to pay 15% fees or 13% fees. It's like, that's a myth. On eBay, you actually don't. On high-end items, even if you don't have a store, you're not going to pay 12 to 13%. You pay a lot less than that. And you'd pay close to 5.5% if you're an above standard seller and you don't have a store for a $25,000 item. So 5.5%, and you pay quite a bit less if you do have a store. The below rated sellers, they don't get these rates. And if you're a below rated seller, there's 3 different levels. There's below rated, or below standard. Sorry, it's late. Above standard, and then there's top rated. Top rated is obviously the best. And I feel like most people are probably above standard, so they're in the middle. If you're below standard, you probably shouldn't listen to any of these tips. You should probably stop selling on eBay, maybe even find a new hobby. Maybe you should turn yourself into the authorities because you probably did some messed up stuff. But here are some examples if you have a store and if you don't have a store. So this assumes that you are above standard and that you have a basic store, not the starter store, but the basic store, the one that's $28 a month. $2,000 sale. It's kind of negligible between having a store or not. You save $20. You save 1%, basically, if you have a store and you sell something that's $2,000. If you have the basic store and then you sell something for $3,000, so here's where it starts to make more sense. If you're selling a lot of $3,000 items, it makes a lot of sense to have a store, even if you have to cancel it like a few weeks later. You just have a store for that sale. I don't know how it works with like running an auction and like during the auction, can you start a store? I don't know. I'd assume you'd probably want to open the store before you started that auction. But it's a good question. So a $3,000 sale, you're going to pay $387 in fees without the store, $312 with the store. That's a $75 difference. Again, this is for the above standard sellers in the basic store. With a $5,000 sale, baseball card, all different. There's all these different like rates for different categories. This is sports cards. With a $5,000 sale, you'd pay $645 in fees if you don't have a store. If you do have the store, then it's going to be $360 in fees. So that's a $275 change. So now you're starting to get into that's like 10 months worth of subscription fees just for that $5,000 sale. That's just one, right? That assumes you do no other sales within that 10-month window. For a $7,000 sale without a store, it is a $903 fee, and with a store, it's $406. So you save $500 with a $7,000 sale. So you can see how this kind of escalates exponentially. Once you get to that like $2,500 to $3,000 mark, that's when you start to save more than just like 1%. All right, so what happens here is maybe you're already thinking about this, maybe you're not, but like I think I've delayed making this video for such a long time because I like Mice Labs, I like startup companies, and I root for them often. And Matt Greeny, the COO, I've conversed with him before. Seems like a good guy, but here's the thing, guys: break even for Mice Labs versus eBay is about $9,100. That's if you're top rated. So on Mice Labs, you pay I know Mice Labs only gets 1%, but PayPal gets 3.5%. So it ends up being about 4.5%, if I'm correct, plus another 30 cents maybe or something. So about 4.5% is the effective fee that you pay as a seller to PayPal plus Mice Labs if you sell something on the Mice Labs platform. So if you're top rated on eBay, 9,100 is the break even for. You would end up paying the same fee, the 4.5% fee, through either platform. If you're an above standard seller, then it's 11,200, which again, most people are above standard. To get to top rated, you need to probably satisfy some volume. And if you're below standard, again, just forget about it, because with a store, without a store, kind of going to get hosed. So this isn't like an advertisement to sell high-end stuff on eBay, to be honest. Like if I had like 4 or 5 cards that were between 10,000 and 50,000, and if I wanted to sell them now, I might try to list a few of them in like the third-party auction houses like Golden, Heritage, and what's the other one? PWCC, maybe Alt. More whales are now looking at those platforms, so that would give you like the eyes, the 1%ers eyes at least, versus eBay. But if you're going to list something on eBay at buy it now at your price that you decide, then I think it definitely makes sense. And it does make sense to sell high-end items. So again, you're getting close to a 3 or 4% fee. Try to sell something on Golden. There's a 20% buyer's premium. People that sell high-end stuff can usually negotiate that down. Maybe they pay 10%. They don't pay the full amount of the buyer's premium, so they don't actually lose all of that. It doesn't all go to the auction house. Maybe it's 5% that they ultimately pay. And obviously, if they go over a certain dollar amount, then it could be zero. because it's worth the marketing in itself to kind of have that listed at the the auction house. So, but yeah, it's definitely competitive. Certainly competitive, especially if you get somebody to do buy it now. Auction on eBay, maybe a few years ago, maybe not anymore. Too much competition, in my opinion. The last reason why it makes sense to have an eBay store is because you get your own URL and you can post it places. So it's listed in the description of this video, so make sure you follow me. Number 6, whenever there's like eBay Bucks promotions, and hopefully they didn't absolutely kill that program, because I did hear after the last video I made that they closed it for new people. There's no more new enrollments into eBay Bucks. It might be a temporary thing, it might be a permanent thing, I'm not sure. But as far as I'm aware, they had an eBay Bucks special within the last month, I believe, or month and a half. So I still think they're doing those promotions, and when they do, what you want to do is there's a lot of extra money kind of out there for you, and what you want to do is see if there's anything that you have that's priced like buy it now. Maybe it's a little too high, but you kind of want to sell it, and it might be a good time to check the market on that and change that, convert that from buy it now or best offer to just bin and knock it down a little bit. Because as a buyer, when I have eBay Bucks, I'm looking for the best priced buy it nows, no offers. That's going to slow you down, right? With some offers, what are they like? Are they 24 hours or 48 hours? I forget. But the whole idea of the eBay Bucks promotion is it's within a certain window of time. So you can't really target too many auctions. You're dealing with like a 3-day or 4-day period. And you want to kind of channel your attention and focus on 4 or 5 listings maybe, and it's all stuff that's priced at buy it now. And maybe there's a few auctions also in between, but it would help if you have some buy it nows at reasonable prices and take off the offer so they know they can't get a better deal, because again, that's just going to slow down their ability to execute in that time frame. All right, number 7 is take advantage of 24-hour and 72-hour listings. So like a 1-day or a 3-day auction listing. That's when the player is hot. So it's going to cost you $1. Seems like it's a ripoff, right? But if the card is worth like at least $50, especially if it's over 100, over $500, and it's a card that it's a player that is really hot, but that their prices will eventually soften once all of the supply hits the market. And it could be wax too. So if it's like a Montgomery membership product and you know that you were one of the first people to get it and you want to list it before other people can list it, maybe it's like a Jeremy Pena card, I think it makes a lot of sense to do those 1 or 3-day auctions. 1 day would mean that you have to be even more confident that it's like a super hot card, not just player. In most cases though, you want to use the 7 or 10-day auctions, in my opinion. Number 8, so a lot of people have like a particular day, a favorite, where they like to end their auctions on. And for the longest time, I was doing Monday through Thursday, and I thought that was like the golden rule. But then somebody asked this question on like Facebook or some forum, and everybody's listing like Saturday and Sunday. And I'm like, all right, I'm not going to argue with these people. Like, if all these people are saying it and nobody's saying Thursday or Monday, then maybe what I'm doing, maybe there's no rhyme or reason for it. Maybe it doesn't make sense. So what I would say, though, is I don't hear a lot of people saying Friday. So I might avoid Friday. Who knows? But, you've got to avoid, like, holidays. With regards to, like, the ending timing, that's what this tip is more about. So low-end stuff. So that's between, like, 0 to 100. Low-end stuff, you want to make sure it ends right around 9 to 10:30 Eastern time. That's what I do. If it's high-end would be like 750 to 1,000 and up. You want to make sure it ends between 10 to midnight Eastern time. And mid-end, between 100 to 750, somewhere in between, somewhere in the middle of that is what I'd say. And I would tweak this based on the buyer. So like, who's the buyer of this? Is it a Buster Posey parallel from his rookie year? Because, the buyers are probably going to come from the West Coast with that. So you might want to list it a little bit later. Now, if it's something that's like a soccer player, international soccer, like Mbappe First of all, it's mostly going to be American buyers that be interested in that. So you have to think about that too. Like, don't just think of like the home team. Like, and it's the same for baseball. Like Marco Luciano, people are less like team collectors in the prospect stages, especially when it's like a top 10 prospect. Um, and with international players, even if the demand was only in Europe, I think Europe and other continents understand like the peak eBay times. So even if it's not in their nighttime when they've got all this free time, they understand that they need to be setting their snipes like for afternoons or for mornings, whatever the equivalent is in the US. Um, so I would alter it a little bit, but the time frame of like 9 p.m. to midnight, I would try to stick with that. Now the reason for that, low end items, you want to get people before they run out of money. So it's not bad to list it a little bit earlier than peak like midnight or 11 o'clock. You want to get people to kind of find your card and buy it before they buy something else that shows up afterwards. So it's not a horrible thing for it to be a little bit earlier. Now the high end stuff, that's a little bit different. And I'm trying to like rationalize this in my head. And I'm like, it's almost like people need to be mentally ready to make the commitment to buy it or set their snipes for it. So you're giving them a little bit of extra time. Maybe they'll be a little bit looser. Maybe they'll be a little bit drunk. Kind of goes against what I said about don't listing it on Friday, but that could be a reason to list something on Friday. You've got Saturday as well, and people drink during the week, I'm sure. Even if it is just like one or two, it'll loosen them up enough to maybe make the decision on it, and it'll give them so much time not to forget it. Number 9 is going to be freebies. Now this is sort of personal preference, and I would understand if you didn't believe in this, but if you find that somebody maybe overpaid on something, like an auction went for higher than it should have by like quite a bit, like, oh wow, that went for $1,300, I expected like $950. What I do is I include some extras in the box, maybe a few extra packs. I've got a lot of sealed stuff, and people love that, So sometimes I'll throw in a few loose packs if I have them, or some cards. And what they try to do is, like with me, I don't know if it's when I overpay on stuff, maybe it is. They send me like a bunch of singles of like, second, third year, like Red Sox players. And I think I've actually gotten some good stuff once from that. So you want to avoid a return. And I know it's harder to return stuff these days. I mean, you could get some return customers too if you include some freebies. All right, number 10, eBay standard envelope. So I wasn't going to talk about this at first, because I'm like, well, that's like really standard. Everybody knows that, but maybe not. And if anything, I could provide some of my thoughts on this based on what I've experienced. I feel like 3 out of every 4 people that talk about this have had good experiences. There definitely have been some bad experiences. I've heard from sellers and buyers. I think it has a lot to do with your carrier, because if they don't scan these envelopes, then not only will you piss off the buyer, because he might not think that he's going to get it, but a lot of times, like, the acceptance scan doesn't show up, but it's the delivery scan. It like scans at the very end when it gets delivered. That's usually the most reliable scan. Well, your analytics as a seller could get hurt by that. You could actually lose top rated status if that persists and becomes an issue. You're supposed to have like a target percentage of, like, I forget what it is, but it's like close to 100% of items being scanned on time. It's not just printing the label, but it's also like the item actually being received and checked in and scanned by the post office as it gets delivered to the post office. But for me, it's been good. I guess I've got like pretty good USPS workers. Biggest complaint I've had in like 100 things I've sold this way is showed up a little bit late. I think in this case it like was scanned as delivered, but showed up a few days later. I don't know what happened there, but for me, it's been pretty good. I'll usually ship stuff out in these like standard envelopes. Like, these aren't like the business envelopes. These are 3 5/8 by 6.5, so a little bit smaller. And I'll just put like some painter's tape. I'll put that over the top loader. And in some cases, if you wanna, you could always use like the cereal box cardboard, like really thin cardboard, if you want to put like extra protection around it. Don't go too crazy, because this can't be more than a 1/4 inch thick. But a 1/4 inch is more than you think, and I've actually been able to ship out all different sizes of top loaders in these things. The standard ones, the 35s, the 59s, the 75s, most relics, to be honest. Like I shipped out an NT RPA. Sometimes what you can do is if you sell something in a lot, you can actually you can use the business size, the wider envelope, and you can just tape all the cards together, or you can just find a bigger top loader and stick all those cards in there in sleeves. But so far, I mean, the buyers haven't complained. It seems to be working, and I mark it down as 1 ounce always. So I'm paying the 57 cents. If it ends up being more than 2 ounces, I think then you have to put 2 ounces. But it's actually hard to get over 1.9 ounces, which I think then would be, you have to pay for 2 ounces. But 1 ounce, again, it's 57 cents. These days, guys, USPS first class is not cheap, especially during the holidays. They trick you. It's it'll go down after the temporary holiday spike, and then it goes down in January, but to a higher amount than what it was the previous September or October. And they start these holiday increases super early, well before Christmas or Thanksgiving. But for me, it's been working. What I do is when I list something at 99 cents and I think it's a $25 item, I'll list it with the standard envelope. Now, it's meant to be for items that are $20 and under. So if the item actually sells for more than $20, then I'll use first class. Maybe you have a slightly different process where you don't ensure that you're giving people all this free first class shipping. We want to make sure you don't do is the opposite of what I'm saying, where they pay for first class shipping and then you ship it out in a standard envelope, because that could give you negative feedback. And going back to tip number 3, automating the feedback, that seller feedback score is so important, guys. And those are my 10 tips for selling on eBay. Let me know what you think down below. Thanks, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. Welcome new subscribers. Take care. Filmington out.